The listing said fully equipped kitchen. Singular. One stove, one sink, one fridge. Exactly what you'd expect in a 600 square foot tiny house. But the gas bill said something different. 2 active gas lines. 2 separate meters running through the same small structure. And only one visible stove to explain either of them. Somewhere inside this tiny house, there was a second kitchen. Wired, plumbed, and running. That the buyer was never shown, never told about, and would never have found by just walking through the front door. By the end of this video, you're going to see exactly how it was hidden, why a builder would go to that much trouble to hide a kitchen instead of just removing it, and what a second, undisclosed kitchen can legally do to a home in 2026, because the real answer isn't spooky. It's actually one of the most common and most quietly serious problems in small home real estate right now. Before I show you where it was hiding, hit subscribe now, because I'm going to walk through this discovery in the exact order it happened, and the reason this kitchen was hidden is not what most people guess. Subscribe now, so you catch the reveal. Let's go back to the utility bill. Before we get to how this kitchen was found, you need to understand why anyone would go through the trouble of hiding one in the first place, because on the surface it sounds almost silly. It's a stove, a sink, some cabinets. Who hides that? The answer is that in most residential zoning codes across the country in 2026, a second kitchen isn't just an appliance. It's a legal trigger. Zoning departments in cities like Bellevue, Washington, treat a second cooking area as the defining threshold that separates a single-family home from a multifamily dwelling. The specific legal test usually isn't about how many sinks or how many cabinets a space has. It comes down to whether there's a permanent range or oven, a dedicated cooking appliance capable of full meal preparation. Cross that line, and the property can be reclassified from one dwelling unit to 2, whether or not anyone intended for it to function as 2 separate homes. That single reclassification changes almost everything about how a property is legally treated. It can trigger new permitting requirements for separate egress and fire separation between units. It can change how the property is taxed and insured. It can affect resale eligibility, because a property that's functioning as an unpermitted multi-family dwelling can be flagged during a future sale, appraisal, or title search. New York City's Department of Buildings has been especially explicit about this. Inspectors there treat a second kitchen as a primary red flag for an illegal conversion. Specifically, evidence that a home has been quietly split into an unauthorized rental unit or separate residence without ever updating the certificate of occupancy. A single-family home cannot legally function as a 2-family home without new filings, and the presence of an undisclosed second kitchen is one of the clearest physical signs that it might be doing exactly that. Even outside major cities, this pattern holds. In Draper, Utah, the local code is specific enough to define the exact moment a second kitchen crosses the line into becoming an illegal second dwelling unit. If it's separated from the rest of the home by a locking door, that separation itself is treated as evidence a second, independent living space has been created, regardless of who's using it or whether rent is being charged. So a second kitchen isn't just an amenity. In the eyes of most zoning departments, it's the single most common piece of physical evidence that a home is secretly operating as more than one legal unit. There's also a specific technical line that matters a lot here, and it's worth understanding because it's the exact line a hidden second kitchen is usually built to stages past. Most codes distinguish between a kitchenette and a full kitchen based on the cooking appliance. A wet bar with just a sink and a small fridge generally doesn't count as a kitchen at all under most codes, because there's no cooking appliance involved. A kitchenette without a permanent range or full-size oven often stays legal in single-family zones for exactly the same reason. The moment a permanent range or oven gets installed, capable of preparing a full meal independently of the main kitchen, that's usually the threshold that flips a space from convenience feature to second dwelling unit in the eyes of an inspector. Builders who understand this line sometimes deliberately design around it, and sometimes, as we're about to see, deliberately cross it and just make sure nobody official ever looks. It's also worth noting this isn't uniform everywhere. Some cities like Bellevue, Washington, have a fairly clear, well-documented legal path to a second kitchen through approved ADUs, detached accessory dwelling units, or legally separated in-law suites, all requiring permits, but all achievable. Other cities are far more restrictive. Huntsville, Alabama, for example, currently allows only one narrow, specific path to a second kitchen, an interior in-law suite inside the main dwelling, owner-occupied, family or guests only, with no rent charged and no separate entrance. Detached structures there are barred from having kitchens entirely. That range, from buildable with the right permits to essentially prohibited outside one narrow exception, is exactly why a builder facing pressure to add rentable income to a small structure might choose concealment over a formal application that could simply be denied. Which brings us back to our tiny house and the 2 gas meters that didn't add up. The buyer, after noticing the mismatch on the utility bill, did what any methodical person would do. They walked the exterior of the house, tracing the visible gas line from the meter to where it entered the structure. It disappeared into the wall behind what the floor plan labeled as a pantry, a narrow closet-sized space just off the main kitchen, roughly 3 feet deep, lined with shelving. On the surface, completely ordinary. Plenty of tiny houses use every inch of space for storage, and a slim pantry behind the kitchen wall wouldn't raise anyone's eyebrows on a walkthrough. But gas lines don't run into pantries. There's no reason for a shelving closet to need a dedicated gas connection, and yet the line clearly continued behind that wall rather than terminating at the visible kitchen appliances. When the shelving was removed, and it came out easily, mounted on a panel rather than built into the studs, which in hindsight was its own quiet clue, it revealed a second wall behind the first. Thinner, newer, not original to the structure's framing. Behind that second wall was a fully functional second kitchen, a compact range connected to the second gas line, a small sink plumbed into its own line, and a mini fridge, all fitted into a space roughly the same footprint as the visible pantry it had been built to hide behind. This is a strikingly close match to a pattern that shows up again and again in real code enforcement cases around undisclosed second kitchens. An appraiser's forum discussion from real estate professionals describes finding fully finished second kitchens converted from spaces like garages, built to a similar quality as the main home, that show no obvious safety issues on the surface, but were never permitted, and therefore legally don't exist at all. In case after case, the finished work is the disguise. Nobody hides a second kitchen behind an obviously fake wall. They hide it behind something ordinary enough that nobody thinks to look twice. When the buyer pulled the permit history for the property, the picture became clear. The tiny house had originally been permitted and sold as a single-family accessory dwelling unit, a legal secondary structure on a larger residential lot, approved under the property's existing single-family zoning. That approval, like most ADU approvals, came with a specific condition: 1 dwelling unit, 1 kitchen. The whole legal basis for the structure being allowed to exist on that lot at all depended on it staying a single unit. At some point after the original permit was finalized and the final inspection was signed off, a second kitchen was added, almost certainly to allow the structure to be split and rented as 2 separate living spaces, doubling the income potential of the same small footprint. But adding that second kitchen openly would have meant reapplying for a new permit, one that reclassifies the structure from a single accessory dwelling unit to a duplex-style arrangement, which in most jurisdictions triggers a completely different, and often far more restrictive, set of zoning requirements. Depending on the lot, that reclassification might not even have been legally possible to approve. So instead of going through that process and risking a rejection that would leave the extra construction cost with no legal use, the builder or a previous owner appears to have built a second kitchen and then concealed it behind a false wall, keeping the structure looking, on paper, and on any casual walkthrough, exactly like the single-unit ADU it was originally permitted as. This is exactly the kind of scenario zoning attorneys describe when they're asked what's actually illegal about having 2 kitchens in a home. It's rarely the kitchen itself that's the problem. It's what a second kitchen implies about how many separate households a property is functioning as, without the permits, inspections, and safety requirements, separate egress routes, fire-rated separation between units, independent utility metering. They're specifically designed to keep multiple households in one structure safe. And that last point matters more than it might seem. Building codes that require separate egress and fire separation between units aren't bureaucratic box checking. They exist because a structure built and inspected as a single household doesn't have the same fire spread protections escape routes, or structural assumptions as one legally built to house two separate households. A hidden second kitchen doesn't just risk a fine. It can mean people are living in a space that was never actually built, tested, or approved to safely support the number of people using it. For our buyer, discovering the hidden kitchen didn't just answer a curiosity. It opened up a genuine legal and financial problem. Because the second kitchen was unpermitted, it legally doesn't exist as far as the county is concerned, no matter how well it was built. That means it can't be counted toward the home's value in an appraisal. And in many jurisdictions, a lender or title company that discovers it during a resale can require it to be either formally legalized through a new permit application or physically removed, appliances pulled, gas line capped, before the sale can close. It also raised a disclosure question. If the previous owner or builder used that second kitchen to rent the space as a secret duplex, even briefly, that rental income and the structure's actual functional use may never have been reported accurately to the county, the tax assessor, or the buyer during the sale, creating exactly the kind of paper trail gap that has led, in more than a few similar cases nationally, to code enforcement action once it's finally discovered by a new owner, an inspector, or a curious utility bill. The responsible next step in a case like this isn't to just quietly wall it back up and hope nobody asks. It's to contact the local building or zoning department directly, disclose what was found, and find out whether the structure and lot can legally support a formal, permitted second unit, or whether the second kitchen needs to be professionally removed to bring the property back into compliance with its original approval. If any part of this made you wonder about your own house, here's the responsible, non-destructive way to check. Start with your utility bills. Compare the number of active gas, water, and electrical meters or submeters to the number of kitchens and bathrooms you can actually see and access. A mismatch, like two active gas lines feeding a home with only one visible stove, is one of the most reliable and least invasive indicators that something is unaccounted for. Second, look at your property's permit history, which in most counties is available for free through the local building or assessor's office website. Compare what's on file, the approved number of units, the approved layout, to what physically exists in your home today. Any addition that was never reflected in an updated permit is worth understanding, even if it seems harmless. Third, if you're buying a tiny house, an ADU, or any secondary structure specifically, ask directly whether the structure was ever approved for more than one kitchen, and ask to see the final, most recent inspection report rather than just the original approval. Structures get modified after their first inspection more often than buyers assume, and the original permit alone won't tell you what's true today. And if you do find a genuine discrepancy in your own home, the same rule applies here as it would with any other structural surprise. The right first call is your local building department or a licensed contractor, not a hammer and a guess. So let's bring this back to where we started. 2 gas meters, 1 visible stove, and a second, fully functional kitchen hidden behind a pantry wall that was never built to store food. It was built to keep a second household invisible to anyone who wasn't looking closely enough to ask why a closet needed its own gas line. The scariest part of this story was never the kitchen itself. It's how ordinary the disguise was. Not a secret door, not a hidden switch, just shelving, mounted a little too easily, in front of a wall that didn't need to exist unless something valuable was behind it. If you want more of these, real zoning cases, real permit records, no exaggeration, just the parts of these tiny house stories that hold up when you actually dig into the paperwork. Subscribe, because the next one covers a tiny house that passed 3 separate inspections with a bathroom that, according to the county's own records, officially isn't there. Thanks for watching all the way through. I'll see you in the next one.